Everyone says the rules don't change after acquisitions. I'm not saying they're lying. I'm just saying they're not telling the truth. Rules change after acquisitions, always, no matter what. It always changes. The vendors, the OEMs, the manufacturers, software organizations, don't care who they are. When they go through an acquisition, the rules of engagement are going to change.
Welcome to the Incident Report presented by Quest Technology Management. I'm Paul Burke, Director of Technology Communications. Every week, I'm joined by VP of Sales and Partnerships, Adam Burke. The Incident Report brings you skills, tactics, and channel news to help you stay productive and agile in a changing technology landscape. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Incident Report. I'm your host, Paul Burke. I'm half your hosts. Across from me, Adam, how you doing today?
Good, Paul. We are rolling into June. Q2 is in full effect. It's summer, which in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area means it's approaching the temperature of the surface of the sun, which is fantastic. Kids are home from school. Internet's getting crushed by gaming and Netflix for those working from home offices. People are dealing with that. But yeah, going good. So excited to get into a little bit of our new approach today. You know, our little, hey, we're gonna try something a little different, which I like.
We're redoing things here. We're changing it up.
To our massive audience, we appreciate each and every one of the 6 of you who listen. We're going through some articles, we're going through some topics, but we thought would be good, and Paul and I were talking about this, and our goal is to share our thoughts on what's happening in the channel. And that can spark off in a lot of different ways. You know, AI topics, security topics, different things going on. We usually pick a couple articles, but they might not necessarily be on trend or on a specific topic. So what we're going to try to do, and you're going to notice it today, still going to be going over some articles, still going to be using those as some thought-provoking conversations, and hey, what are we seeing? But we're going to be every episode we're going to maybe focus on, you know, 1 or 2 trends that we see. Any other thoughts on that one, Paul?
We were previously focused on the stories. Let's bring up stories we think that are relevant, but we realize that quickly becomes outdated. We want to do more evergreen content, things that you can go back and listen to and use, like actionable steps and ideas to thrive in the channel. So that's our goal, is to help really succeed in the channel. So rather than focusing on stories, we're going to lead first with ideas and tactics. In those, we will use stories to kind of explore those ideas.
And I really just like to listen to myself talk. So we're going to keep that going.
We've gotten feedback. That's what people are here for. Our 6 listeners, we need more Adam talking, sharing his thoughts. So yeah, we're never going to lose that part.
Similar, a little bit of the same. Only took us 75 episodes to figure that out. And yeah, we'll see how the next 75 go.
Today, the topic, M&As, how it affects the channel, how it affects you. On the channel company, crn.com, why Cisco-Splunk Palo Alto networks are targeting real-time security. Cisco acquired Splunk, Palo Alto acquired
QRadar.
What does this mean for the channel?
Well, it means that some private bankers got some nice fees on $28 billion in the acquisition of Splunk, and QRadar being acquired. IBM sold off QRadar to Palo Alto Networks for about $500 million. So some nice boats getting purchased on that one, I'm sure. But you know, in all seriousness, it means that those 2 typically standalone cybersecurity plays are getting molded into different platforms. So Cisco's got a strategy, Palo Alto's got a strategy, and they're bolting on features and functionality of other platforms in order to give their clients additional visibility, right? And what this means is, they're like everything, it's got some positives, it's got some negatives. So the positives first, right? So positives for the Cisco acquisition of Splunk, you got real-time data, you have event correlation capabilities, you have, you know, visibility and rules and policies of people accessing what, when, how often. So significant, maybe people built entire security operations and logging scenarios for SOC analysts and things on the Splunk platform. A lot of people, the industry, network dominance by Cisco, standardized on Cisco Edge and Core route switch. So huge market base, great addressable market for those who want to attack the enterprise with that. So you're bolting that on together. Possible downside is Cisco doesn't necessarily have the best reputation when it comes to integrated acquisitions. Meraki is a good example of one that they kind of left alone and did a really good job of growing that. I won't name any names of companies that Cisco acquired that kind of just fizzled. but that can happen. Cisco is a huge multi-billion-dollar battleship, and it takes time to integrate new solutions there. So we've been a Cisco Gold partner and managed service provider for years. We've seen a lot of acquisitions since the 90s, and I've been through a lot of those. Some of them go fantastic. Some of them just you kind of show up at the next year's Cisco Live, and they're like, "Who?" And you're like, "Oh, okay, never mind. I guess we're not talking about them." Good potential, great capabilities with the Splunk acquisition. Potential downside that a lot of people who invested a lot in Splunk, that could lose some. I guess you call it some sunk capital in those investments, those capabilities. The Palo Alto side of the house, again, QRadar, long-time IBM asset. Again, same kind of thing. Event correlation, visibility across the stack, if then who's accessing what. It's real-time security, right? So real-time event management, got to find those threats, got to find them quickly. And a lot of these security vendors like Palo Alto and Cisco are, that whole XDR concept and getting visibility and combining those capabilities for edge and access control and endpoint security, all that stuff. You got to centralize that. You got to have visibility, and you got to get real-time alerts. So that could be great. QRadar has been around a very, very long time. It'll be interesting to see how Palo Alto takes that and ingest that into their platform. So additional capabilities with a reduced amount of vendors, right? So basically, are you investing in the Cisco platform? Are you investing in the Palo Alto platform? Where are you spending your time? Where are your customers spending their time? Who's marketing the story better?
Since we're focusing on the M&As, and these are two big purchases or acquisitions, if you're selling services, if you're selling products, how does this change the game in the channel?
So from a channel management standpoint, right, you just took two companies and combined them into one. So you had two channel programs, you had two partner bases, you had two different disciplines, two different sets of rules of engagement, right? So now there's some overlap. There were some, like Quest was a Splunk partner and a Cisco partner. So when Cisco acquired Splunk, it wasn't that big of a deal for us. Mm-hmm. But there are organizations that built their entire business around, like I know a couple of folks on the Northeast, there's a good sized firm over there. They were all Splunk. That was their main secret sauce. Hey, we're experts in this, blah, blah, blah. Well, they got acquired by Cisco, and now they got the entire Cisco ecosystem kind of in their swimming pool, right? So how do you navigate that, right? Now it used to be OEMs will kind of play this game around certifications, right? Are you certified or are you enabled enough to sell my product? And part of the reason they do that is it captures your attention, right? You get your engineers trained on something, your engineers think about that product set. So a lot of these firms have invested in getting trained on Cisco, they've invested in getting trained in Palo Alto, they've invested in getting trained in Splunk. When those powers combine, Captain Planet, some of those certifications might not be as relevant or might not protect them as much anymore. They might be signature platinum, gold, diamond, level. And then an acquisition happens and they're now on the same playing field, able to quote the same products as someone who has a basic distribution arrangement. So that can really kind of upset the apple cart if people have invested in certification. It'll be interesting to see how IBM, for example, they had a pretty significant barrier to entry. In order to be an IBM partner, you had to be certified in certain things. In order to sell QRadar, you had to be certified in certain things. In order to be a service provider, you had to be validated by So there were all these gates to get through in order to have access to this technology. Mm-hmm. After an acquisition, some of those gates can go away. So it can level the playing field, if you will, reduce the barrier to entry, but it also, that's the nice democratic way of saying it. Like, oh yeah, we're lowering the barrier to entry, right? Okay, cool. But you're also allowing someone who doesn't know anything about QRadar to sell it. What happens after that happens? So, there's two sides of the argument. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying rules change after acquisitions. Everyone says the rules don't change after acquisitions. I'm not saying they're lying. I'm just saying they're not telling the truth. Rules change after acquisitions, always, no matter what. It always changes. So that's something that as partners, as resellers, we're a reseller. As managed service providers, we provide managed services. The vendors, the OEMs, the manufacturers, software organizations, don't care who they are. When they go through an acquisition, like the Cisco and Splunk instance or the Palo Alto and QRadar, the rules of engagement are going to change. And as partners, we have to be aware of that. Like, okay, who's in the swimming pool with me now, right? Who am I competing against? Who am I partnering with? Sometimes assets and resources can become made available because there's some redundancy in the organization, right? Mm-hmm. So good people can be let go from an organization just because maybe they weren't on XYZ person's team. I know people hate to talk about politics and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of our audience kind of likes to focus on the technology, but oftentimes the technology is not actually what's driving anything. It's more of alliances, politics, who was there, who has registration, who has authorization, who's in whose golf club or whatever. That's the real way these things work.
Do you pay attention to that sort of politicking?
No, because I'm horrible at it. I'm really bad at it. Yeah, I'm not a political animal at all. I'm pretty blunt.
You would be dead episode 1 Game of Thrones.
Well,
how far into the 7 seasons do you feel you would make it in the game of politicking?
I probably would have been slaughtered at the Red Wedding, but yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not good at it, but I do know how to see it.
Which is a big art, being outside of it, just seeing all the pieces moving around.
That is one of, I think, without tooting my own horn, that is one of my strengths as far as like, okay, here's the system, here are the rules of the game, all that kind of stuff. A little personal story. People thought in high school I was really smart because I never got anything lower than an A, and I was top of my class. It's public school in Orangeville. Don't get ahead of yourself. It's not that impressive. But, I was top of the class, and the reason was because it wasn't because I was smart in the class or I was good at English. I was horrible at English. One of our English teachers blocked me from getting into the National Honor Society because she knew I was full of shit. She could see right through me. But what I did not understand was every time I walked into a class, I had figured out exactly what I needed to do in order to get an A in that class. Not that I knew how to actually get the A. I had to figure that out. That was the game. For me, it's a game. And so for all these vendors, all these engagement methods, all these registrations, all that kind of stuff, that's all a game. And the real way things happen is a lot of fun to figure out. One of the first things we ask vendors when they come to our office is, how do you make money? Because everything else is no offense. Everything else is for their reps, for their people. We're in business, we're in sales. If you want to partner, what are your vested interests, right? What are you trying to achieve? What moves the needle for you? When these acquisitions happen, the cheese can move, right? All of a sudden selling route switch was paramount for Cisco forever. It was everything was about how do we sell more routers and switches, right? Over the last 10 years has transitioned. It's still about route switch, but now it's how do we sell more annual reoccurring revenue? How do we bump up our TCV, our total contract value in the security space? And that's important because that transition right there, which we all became aware of about 3 years ago, right? You understand why they spent money on Splunk, because that's going to add additional subscription, additional contract value, additional annual recurring revenue, and that's going to help their stock multiple. So just being aware of it. I have no idea how to pull the levers of power or actually make any of that stuff happen. I'm completely ignorant to that. But what Quest has taught me and what Tim has taught me and what, being in this business for the last 14 years has taught me directly is what motivates people, how are they making their actual decisions, and those things can change or they can signal these types of acquisitions. And it's like, okay, yeah, they bought a huge multi-billion-dollar security company that has reoccurring annual revenue and has a lot of firms that have significant sunk costs into their Splunk practice. So what does that mean? Well, it means that probably for the next 5 years, they're going to get renewals on Splunk assets, and they're going to continue to tighten the noose on those people who have investments in adjacent technologies and combine them together and grow their multiple. Sounds a little Machiavellian, but that's what it is. And it's exciting because those types of changes create huge opportunities in the channel to either support what they're trying to do, pick up the breadcrumbs of, assets that fall off and people who are left in the lurch and need help, because these battleships, they move slowly, but they disrupt things when they make these kind of changes. They're, just because Cisco and Splunk decide to do something doesn't mean your customers want to go along for the journey. Same with Palo Alto and QRadar, right? It doesn't, great. You got a strategy on how to improve your multiple and do more and make more money. Fantastic. Every other business that's affected by that has to make their own decisions.
Okay. See, this is exactly why I'm excited about the change we made for the podcast, because you're given great insight. I think, to summarize, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, hey, don't get emotional about the changes. Don't get tied to these changes. Just observe objectively. And if this happens, then what does it mean for the overall picture? And then adjust your own personal battleship as these gigantic carriers are out there moving in the ocean.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely right. I mean, most of us are skiffs at best, right? And we're just kind of bouncing around in the wake of these giant things moving out there, trying to deal with what our customers are dealing with, and that's it's a lot of fun. I mean, it's chaos, but I know you always ask me what shows I'm watching, and we kind of chat about shows like at the end of the podcast. I'm watching Black Sails right now. It's about pirates and about Nassau, and it's horrible consciousness and terrible things happen on it. It is about piracy, and it's about waves and huge things happening and all the chaos that ensues. And not that we're sinking battleships and stealing loot or anything like that here in the channel, but we are dealing with massive forces, huge organizations, and the ramifications to our customers. How do you deal with it? So it's a lot of fun.
That's a great way to approach it. All right, we're staying on crn.com. Ntiva acquiring the Purple Guys is a really colossal deal.
I saw this one out there for a while. It was cool they got the deal done. It's a massive M&A deal. They've been doing a lot of them. I think we're going to continue to see MSPs, that are rolling each other up and kind of becoming larger and larger companies. So it was just another signal. This is different than the Splunk, QRadar roll-ups that happen with Cisco and Palo Alto respectively. This is more on the service provider side of the house. So the MSPs that use the tools that support the customers, right? So this is a consolidation of a roll-up, of a couple roll-ups. The Purple Guys have been kind of packaging some things together over the last couple of years. We've been watching them do that, through some of the kind of the dynamic roll-ups that we were seeing happen in the 2019, 2020, and everything like that.
They've had 10 acquisitions since 2020. They've been rolling up a lot.
Yeah, so usually the way it works is one of the private equity firms will acquire what's called a platform company. Usually platform companies they're supposed to be north of 100 million. I'm not sure if these guys were, but anything that they can build a platform and bolt on additional acquisitions to grow the EBITDA and then sell it off to the next group. So it's kind of a bolt-on roll-up play. So basically you find someone that's an operator in a certain space, and in an MSP, there's lots of operators around. And then you find other groups that you can augment them that have existing customer bases that the theory is you can then cross-sell and grow that as well. We'll see how it works out for them. That one caught my attention because I've been watching that firm for about the last 3 years.
I don't want to ask you to crystal ball this thing, but how do you think it's going to affect? I guess I'm going to say it. I'm going to ask you to crystal ball it. How do you think this is going to affect the industry?
I don't think it's going to affect the industry like in a direct way. I think it's more of a signal that roll-ups and deal flow has kind of slowed down in the M&A world over the last couple of months, with a lot of deals getting talked about, but not a lot of them are getting across the line just due to interest rates, because everyone finances these deals with debt, and the interest rates are getting higher. We talked about it a couple episodes ago, where I think the Converge One guys declared bankruptcy due to their significant floating debt interest payments. I think it's a signal. This was like, oh, okay, cool. Someone got a deal done. Like, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Someone got a deal done. I don't know the nature of the deal. I don't know what the inside outs of it, but it's I think it's a good sign that if you're a private banker, that hey, someone got one across the finish line. So congrats to those two firms that are representing those groups. But yeah, I don't think it's going to really affect the industry. It's kind of it's a roll up and the relationships are really with the subsidiary units. We'll see if the firm and the roll up is able to transition into a larger transition those accounts into the larger organization, which I'm sure they will. There's attrition for everyone when you do these things. I think it's more of a signal as opposed to directly affecting the industry. I did want to talk a little bit about AireSpring does a state of the channel with all the leaders of the TSBs. I thought that was an interesting webinar. I wanted to chat a little bit about that one. A lot of the topic was around merger and acquisitions, and I haven't figured this out. I've reached out to my private banker friends. There was a rumor that a big super agent was trying to get acquired, and there were no buyers. So that caught my attention. I don't know who they were referring to. I'm not part of the rumor mill, but it definitely piqued my interest because I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I've been reaching out trying to figure out who that was, who can't get a buyer. Hopefully I'll find out soon. But the idea was a lot of these firms have taken on private equity. Some of them are at different phases of that. We've talked about Intelisys and the Nucor announcement that upset a lot of people. They covered that directly yesterday, but they asked some questions to all the leadership. So like Drew from Avant was on, Adam from Telarus was on, Paul from Intelisys was on, Jason from Sandler. They were all on the show. It was everybody. And they asked the direct question, like, how do you think M&A and private equity is affecting the TSB world? And then they also asked like the second bite at the apple. And I don't think a lot of people on the call actually knew what the second bite of the apple meant. Not the leadership, but I mean like people listening. Like when you say second bite at the apple, the idea is that private equity, in order to have a successful transaction, they buy a portion, a majority, or a stake in a company. And then within 4 to 6 years, in order to have a successful investment, the idea is I invested $1 year one. By year 5, that $1 better equate to 2, 2.5, 3, right? It's not complicated. I put $1 into the machine. At the end of my term, when I sell out to the next person, which is what private equity wants to do, they want to sell at a certain iteration. I get $2, $2.5, $3 back. Well, it caught my attention around the super agent that's not able to get sold right now. And the reason it caught my attention is because we chatted about this a few episodes back. I always thought that when these firms were getting 10, 12, 20 times multiples for basically their net cash flow or their EBITDA, that was a significant value that they were capturing. They were getting a good deal, right? Those who sold in the 2020, 2021, 2022 timeframe. I always thought in order for that private equity firm to get 2, 2.5, 3 times their money back, there's only 3 ways that a TSD can accomplish that. The first is they massively grow their agent base and they massively grow their sales. So if we just use round numbers, if a firm if a TSD is receiving $100 million a year in residual income, they usually pass on, let's say, they pass on between 90 and 60% of that to their sub-agents. So which means they keep between 10 and 40% for the house. So just for simple math, we'll say they receive $100 million from suppliers like us, right? We build a customer, we pay the TSBs, and they pass on, let's just say they pass on 80%. So they keep $20 million every year. We'll just pretend that's their EBITDA or that's their net cash flow, right? Just pretending for round numbers here. Mm-hmm. If a private equity firm was to buy the entire company at a 10 multiple, that means they're writing a check to the owners for $200 million, 10 times that 20. So they keep $20 million a year. That private equity firm says, I'm going to write you a check for 10 times your EBITDA. Some people are getting higher valuations, whatever. So that's $200 million. Okay. In order for that private equity firm to achieve their objective in 5 years, they need to somehow get that 20 million. Let's just pretend they sell at the same multiple. We're going to keep that consistent. Mm-hmm. In 5 years, they sell at the same multiple. They need to get that $20 million to $40 million, which means if they're keeping 20% of the residual income, they've been getting $100 million. They have to double their themselves and their residuals within that 5-year span, which that's pretty significant growth. Some might make it, some might not. I would venture to say that maybe one of the reasons, so that's one way you can do it. You can do it by doubling your sales. The other way you can do it is maybe you capture more of that $100 million coming in the door, right? Because if you capture, let's say you're usually keeping 20, but now you're keeping 40, you doubled. You did it. Hey, you doubled it. So how do you capture more of that $100 million coming in the gate? You can do that two ways, right? You can do that. I always thought, because like 3 years ago, I saw like Intelisys starting their Microsoft integration services, starting their professional services. They started advertising their own in-house professional services arms. I thought they were going to do it by adding services, right? So I've kind of always been looking for signals, and we've seen it with Bridgepoint and a few others that have bought integrators. They've bought people who can actually help turn wrenches and charge for turning wrenches. So not only are they getting the money in the door, they're also getting money on professional services. So that's one way to grow that 20 million to 40 million. So during the AireSpring conversation yesterday, the competing agency was a big topic. Intelisys announced that they were going to start something called NewCo, and they were going to basically provide agency services directly to an end user, leveraging their supplier contacts. So what that does is basically for every net new dollar that goes through NewCo, ScanSource recognizes 100% of the residual income as their income, as opposed to dishing out 80% to their sub-agent and keeping 20% for the house.
And so a lot easier to get to the hypothetical 40 million.
Yeah, a lot easier to get there, right? Because, and I think the channel is aware of it because everyone knows that that's the game. In order to do it, you have to double your sales, which there are a couple TSBs out there who over 5 years, I would venture to say, those dudes are growing fast. I've seen their numbers. I see the numbers we pay them. And I'm like, maybe they doubled. I don't know. But I also know that certain people are cherry picking agents from other people and moving books around. And so it's not a zero sum game. Like the pie is getting bigger, but at the same time the pie is getting bigger, some TSDs are taking revenue from others at the same time. By the way, there were 6 competitors on a call yesterday, all just smiling and being so polite to each other. It was disgusting. But it was fun. They're all very, very politically polished. It was good. They did a good job. But yeah, that pie is growing, but that's shifting. And a lot of the guys who are tied to private equity, they got to double because that next bite at the apple, that private equity firm they want their money and they want their return. And they need at least a 2x return usually for that to be a successful engagement. That's a driver. There's 3 ways you can do it. You can significantly increase your agents and your sales. You can create your own agency and capture additional revenue. Or what I was incorrect, or at least I was incorrect up to now, services. I still think that the play that where the channel is going is TSDs are going to have to start delivering additional services billable to the end user or through their partners to capture additional revenue. They just have to. If they're taking private money and looking for multiples and dealing with people who are dealing with exits, they got to make one of 3 choices. It's like when you want to add a new service to your line card. You either build it yourself, you partner with someone to deliver it, or you buy someone. Like, I know people like to overcomplicate and talk about things a lot. I really think that these TSDs and the merger and acquisition, they have 3 options. Grow significantly, start offering services of their own to capture additional spend and wallet share of the end user customers, or take the residuals direct.
That is such an interesting breakdown. I love this new format. This is great.
Format's great.
What's going on this weekend? Anything happening you want to share?
This weekend, no, just living the summer life in Arizona. I got the AC cranking, got the pool going. Should be a good weekend. How about you?
I don't know, might go to the movies, might check out Furiosa. I can let you know next week.
Update the people. We'll have a Furiosa review.
Look forward to that. Everybody listening, thank you for being here. Adam, thank you for sharing all your insights, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Paul. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks so much for listening. The Incident Report is brought to you by Quest Technology Management. With over 40 years of experience, Quest is a leading technology integrator working seamlessly with your staff and systems to achieve your IT goals. Learn more about everything they do at questsys.com. And if you have questions or suggestions for the podcast, you can always email Adam and myself at theincidentreport@questsys.com. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.